the
Let everyone
question.
else in. There's no one else?
There's nobody else waiting to get into the meeting other than the participants that you see here.
Okay. Well, gee, should I really read all this form? Here I go.
Eric's missing something. Yeah.
No, we are recording.
So good afternoon. I'd like to reconvene the ICA monthly meeting that was recessed on June 23rd, 2021. We come together today with the sole mission of discussing the City of Harrisburg's revised and restated 5-year financial plan as submitted June 11th, 2021, and as was identified on the agenda of that meeting. Mark Ryan is unable to be here today. And Dan let us know that he has a conflict for today as well, so he will not be participating. Jeffrey and I did have a call with Dan, Neil, and Mark Woolley yesterday to make sure we had a good perspective as to how they wanted to deal with the recent actions by council to table all discussions relative to the refinancing. They indicated that they wanted to leave the 5-year financial plan document as it was submitted. Yesterday, we also received the revised memo from the controller, Charlie DeBrunner, which pointed out his concern relating to the terms of the defeasance of the Series A2 bonds and the refinancing of the AMBEC loan. He concluded that email by saying, except for the concern expressed above, we have found the assumptions and estimates in the plan to be reasonable. So I'd like to open up the floor to discussions about the 5 reactions, discussions, and potential action on the 5-year plan. Comments? So, actions, if there are no comments.
Madam Chair, if I may.
Yes, please, Ralph.
Looking at the controller's opinion and the actions of City Council recently, it appears that despite what's in the plan, it doesn't appear certain that the city actually will proceed with some of the actions that are laid out in the plan regarding to the debt refinancing. And I just wanted to clarify with the board and with our staff what the implications of that would be as far as complying with the plan and with Act 124. I don't personally have a problem with approving a plan that shows the new debt refinancing taking place, even if the city decides ultimately to use general fund cash balance and not end up refinancing it. I think that's okay. And I personally also would probably share some of the city controller's concerns regarding using new debt to refinance all of that, all those debt obligations when the city has such a large cash balance currently on hand. And without a real explanation as to why the city wants to maintain such a seemingly excessively large general fund cash balance, rather than use that and sort of minimize the interest expense when there doesn't seem to be another use for the excess cash. So so that's kind of two comments folded into one, but I would like to hear comments from the other members of the authority as well as staff regarding implications of approving the plan as shown if in fact the city does not take all the actions that are laid out in there.
And let me respond in part to that, because I have thought about that too, Ralph, and that was part of the reason I wanted to speak to them yesterday. I think we're fine because in fact, the language in which is why I turned my back on you all, I apologize for that. It says, before the plan of finance is finalized, the city will consider other alternatives, including possibly using fund balance to pay down rather than finance a portion of the debt, which would reduce the overall size of the borrowing and thus interest expense. So I think already inherent in what they presented is this possibility. And in this case, rather than, if they didn't do this, rather than increasing expenses, they would be reducing their overall projection, because both are presented, but only the current scenario is being used, I think, in all the future projections. So that is just my perspective. Jeffrey, Kathy, Carla, Doug?
No, I'll agree on all the points that have been made thus far. And I think the other thing that the city pointed out, even before the outcome of the election was apparent, was that they were considering this a working document that would be subject to additional revisions during the course of the year. And particularly given the complexity of the negotiations they were already in on the bond refinancing, I think that was kind of a marker as much as a commitment.
I feel very similar, Madam Chairman, in that it is a plan. It is not something that has been approved at this point, or that we're asking to approve a plan. But the idea of a plan generally is that it can be changed once it has been set down. That's the very purpose of a plan, in my estimation, is to put something down that people can then work with as a draft to determine if they want to follow it or not. I probably would feel differently if we were at a different point in the municipal cycle, but as we all know, we've got an incoming administration which may or may not go along with the plan as it is written. I suspect will want to make, the new administration will want to make its own changes. I think at this point in time, for us to say that we disapprove the plan would be fraught with problems, because the comptroller has said that he thinks the assumptions in it, other than the refinancing, are reasonable. I take a lot of solace in that. An independent person looking at it and saying that at least the projections for the basic plan are reasonable is a good thing. And that's the reason that eventually I intend to vote for it as it is. But I believe a vote for it as it is today only means that we're voting for other folks to look at the plan and make changes to the plan going forward.
Anna Marie?
If I might, I do think Kathy's point about the controller's opinion is probably the most critical, because up until this point, the most common concerns expressed by this board have been whether or not the underlying assumptions from which the various activities have been planned in the document, whether those underlying assumptions were appropriate or adequate or correct. And so to the extent that the controller has addressed the fact that he believes the underlying assumptions, calculations, whatever his language was, are indeed correct and supportable, what do we do from their part? The plan part is, as Kathy said, something that's going to always be subject to change. But I do think the fact that, in essence, the numbers and the assumptions, percentage increase, percentage decrease, whatever those assumptions are, have been reviewed by somebody else who's in a more appropriate position to have inside information to know that, certainly goes a long way to making that plan much more acceptable to me, in my mind. That's the issue that's of most concern.
And if I may add to my earlier comments and build on Anna Marie's just a tad, I think it would be a mistake to take at least my vote on the plan today as saying that I approve of the refi as it is stated in the plan. I think that's just mixing the apples and the oranges, because I really expect that the whole idea of the refi will be subject, and I think it most appropriate that it be subject to more constructive commentary and criticism, if you will, before any decisions are finally made.
Madam Chairman, what approval of the plan as it's written right now would do, though, is it would firmly establish the current administration's express intention. So there would be some known thing written down that anybody who wanted to try to figure out what the current administration's intentions are, this is the document. At least I think it could be.
I agree, Anna Marie. I do have issues with everything else that they decline to act on or comment on. And I agree that they say that they are deferring policy issues to the next administration, but they are also deferring things like reporting on neighborhood services funds, collections, those sorts of things in a big umbrella. And so I would encourage us to make sure that we do hold them accountable for the reporting for the action that they need to do in order to keep the city moving ahead. We do not want to miss a beat here and make sure that the city doesn't backslide. Ralph?
I think from a high level view, the plan does demonstrate a stable general fund for this year and for the immediate upcoming years, given the assumptions that are made. It does do a good job flagging items like the priority parking payments that are relatively questionable as to how those are going to pan out, as well as some of the business recovery and the tax revenues associated with that. But I think on the general fund side, the forecast, I think, should give citizens and people who are observers of Harrisburg's financial condition, I think it should give them a lot of confidence and hope that the forthcoming years are going to hopefully hold good things for Harrisburg as far as its financial stability. I think on the Neighborhood Services Fund, similarly, I think the plan does do I think it does a good job on the forecasting side. Of course, it does assume that the collections are improved to the point where the fund, balances financially. And I think that assumption is really, really key. And Madam Chair, you commented a moment ago about the Neighborhood Services Fund collection efforts. And I do think that's critical in the immediate term. And I think that's critical to demonstrating the stability of that fund. Otherwise, we saw what it looked like. We saw the previous forecasts, what that fund balance looks like if the collections stay at the current low rate. So I'll just summarize in saying that I think there's obviously things to focus on as far as improving Harrisburg's finances. But as far as this being a milestone, I think there's a lot to give us as an authority, the Harrisburg's observers and citizens and taxpayers, I think a lot of confidence and hope for the future.
If I could just add a point of order, and just keep in mind, and I spoke to the chair about this, last time that we approved the previous plan, the 2020 plan, which was approved in early 2021, the board decided to send correspondence with that approval, which pointed out certain concerns that the board continued to have going forward. And I've spoken to the chair that would be wholly appropriate as well in this case. Even if you were to accept the plan as currently presented, there's nothing to prevent the board from, for example, authorizing the chair to include correspondence with some of these concerns annotated so that it can be in the official record.
And if we do that, I would hope that we would include, in addition to questions about the refi, the substance of what Ralph has just indicated in terms of the optimism, because especially coming from the developer viewpoint, I think it's really, really important to realize that we have made some strides. And the other thing for me that's important is the knowledge that no one is expecting to have huge tax increases in a city where it's going to be difficult to put any tax increases in place, in my estimation. So from the average citizen's viewpoint, as well as the optimism of someone who might be looking to do some sort of a project here. I think that optimistic note is really important to add. Carly, you're muted.
All right, yeah. So I'm new to the group, so I have a question more so than a comment. So so if we were to vote on this today, would it tie the hands of the new administration coming forward to make any changes? It would not?
No, it would not. As soon as the new administration is sworn in, or as a new administration is sworn in this case, anyway, the new administration, they get to reopen the 5-year financial plan immediately and make changes and submit it. In addition, they get to reopen the budget of the city and recast it as they would like. So I think you'll see, certainly on the budget front, a skeletal budget being passed this year and then reopened quickly in January.
I do think, Carla, to your point, I do think that the idea of that Jeff was talking about, a letter with concerns or what have you, is certainly a way to point, if you will, the new administration to issues that are of concern to this group that may or may not have been addressed to the group's satisfaction previously, and say, look, we're going to approve this plan, but by the way, the neighborhood services fund collection rate still is a little bit hinky, or whatever the concern, and itemize the concerns. It'll help them. I think it would be helpful to the new administration, whether they change the plan or they don't change the plan, just to know where some outside group looking in sees potential issues, whether they're pluses or minuses.
And Carla, if I may add, one of the things that is driving my personal decision-making on this is that we have such a limited period of time in which to vote either yes or no on this. And I don't see anything constructive happening within that window that's going to make a difference as far as the plan that's been presented. So that's another reason. It's not like we can wait till the new administration is in place to see what they're going to do. We have to make it, and I've forgotten time frame, but it's within days, is it not, Jeff or Anna Marie?
Yeah, now you actually have until Saturday, the day after tomorrow is the deadline for the board to take action, which we've interpreted to be Monday, the next business day. But you have to take action, and we did confirm with the city that they are not at this point granting us a mutually agreeable extension of time. So the board basically has to render a decision today for all intents and purposes. And then just to point out, the new administration will take office January 1st, or the first Monday in January, will probably be when they take office. And then shortly thereafter will be in April of next year, where the new administration will be statutorily required to submit their first 5-year plan, if not sooner. So you'll be at the new administration's submission point before you know it, and time does fly. So that's a lot. It's a heavy lift for the new administration to get their house in order and to put together their first version of a 5-year plan within several months of taking office.
And just to clarify, oh, sorry. I was just going to say, I don't believe the mayor takes office. The city council takes office on the 1st. I believe the mayor is a little later, like the next week, but we can clarify that. But the point stands. It's very early in the year. Sorry, Doug.
Well, on that point too, we're not a stranger to who we consider, I think, to be the lead candidate. So there's, I think, ample opportunity even to engage in some transitional activities prior to assumption in office. Returning back to the plan submittal, and I think particularly the Woolley letter that accompanied it, one of the things that it did mention too were potential to furnish information to us in side letters. And I think that's something as part of our approval and part of our response to the administration, we should remind them we want to take advantage of and perhaps expand a little bit. I think some of our individual commentaries talked about a couple informational items that we could we would be interested in getting some additional numbers or information on.
And I think those were on the salary and wages projections, and then the other one was the completed facilities and capital projects.
Among others, yeah.
Yeah, those were the specific side letters that they said.
That was theirs, but I think we all had a couple other things that we expressed interest in too.
Just because I become a nerd sometimes, or a lot of times, I decided just to take a look at the memorandum that we sent them. And just for stats, there were 37 items that we listed, to Doug's point, 11 of which were grammatical and clerical points. The city addressed 17 of those 37, of which 11 were the clerical issues. So when Doug points out that there's a lot that they didn't address, that is, they only addressed 6 out of 26 items. So I agree that, this has to be part of it as far as what goes back, as well as I would like to make sure we incorporate Mark's letter, even if it's just an hour presentation of the 5-year plan, because it provides insight, one, into the questions that we are presenting, as well as answers to some of the issues where they did answer.
And to follow up on that too, of the 20 that they didn't respond directly, I think there were a handful that I think honestly were policy matters that it is fair to say push that off to the next administration. But there were a number of those 20 that were simple information requests on our part that they should have ready access to and don't involve policy. And so whether it's a side letter or some other mechanism, I think we should still be able to ask for those.
Want them indicated in the letter as to repeat something like, quote unquote, to repeat our request from our previous correspondence, : list, that sort of thing.
With the previous correspondence as an attachment, in my estimation.
Okay, we can do belt and suspenders.
I think there are parts to this. One is the decision on the current submission, and then maybe a second action of the board on what to include with that, or what should the chair place into that. So you might want to separate this to 2 actions, just to keep it organized.
I'm game for whatever motions anyone wants to make. Ralph?
Yeah, I'll be happy to initiate that. I don't know that we need something particular in a motion to post a copy of the accompanying materials. After all, I think the plan meets the statutory framework in such a way that we can approve the plan, and then simply if you'd like me to, I'm happy to. But I think administratively it would be perfectly fine to have a little packet of the supporting information that we reviewed as part of our consideration of the plan, and be able to post that alongside the actual approved dated plan.
Can I suggest that perhaps you make your initial motion to approve the plan because you have the information, and then once that, assuming that meets the second and the majority of the board, then you move on to authorizing administratively the chair to create a material to transmit that material to the city to accompany a notification of the approval. That's sort of what we did in the past. It's sort of we approve it and then we authorize Audrey basically to.
And that way we don't have to come back to the board to have an approval on the actual letter that's submitted after the fact.
Right.
Are you moving that, Ralph?
Yeah, I will make a motion to approve the city's 5-year financial plan.
Second.
I'll second that.
Any further discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye.
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 Motion carries. Having heard that there may be another motion, would someone like to make that motion?
I'll be happy to follow up with an accompanying request to the staff and the chair to take certain administrative steps, including, I think we're already obligated under Act 124, so I don't think that requires any special authorization to publicly post the copies of the approved materials, but I would certainly be happy to make that accompanying motion to authorize the chair to submit correspondence to the city, additional correspondence that includes not just the approval, but also additional commentary and criticism from the authority, both whether it's affirmative or whether it's critical of elements of the plan, as we have done in prior years. So a long-winded way of making a motion. So the abbreviated version would be a motion to authorize the chair to submit correspondence to the city along with the approval of the plan that contains criticism of the board of the items enumerated in the plan.
May I suggest an amendment simply to say constructive criticism?
Certainly.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Motion carries. And Jeffrey and I will work on that letter. He's already ahead of the game and has drafted something. And just, I tried to figure out the points, and those are obviously the side letters that were promised. The 4 overwhelming categories that came through in the attachment were the too much being pushed off onto future administration, Neighborhood Services Fund, the economic plan development and OPEB final steps, and then incorporating, I think, as we like to do, and it's very much in line with what Kathy said, is that we join the mayor in optimism for the future of the city and its residents, something like that. So that's sort of what we'll try and craft together and potentially attach the memorandum that has all the issues itemized minus any commentary. Does that resonate well?
Yep.
That was the only item on our agenda that we did not address in the meeting, that we did not end. So now we come to the end of our meeting. Do we still ask for public comment, or does that, right? That should, because it's a different.
You can. I know there are 2 callers on the line. I don't know. If
Well, I
either one
think one is Marita, one's Bev, and so we just have the person at 570 area code. If we don't hear from you shortly, public comment will be ended. And a reminder that while that person's making up their mind, next meeting is in person, July 28th. I'll work with Jeffrey to see what we can possibly hope to accomplish relative to Zoom. I think we'll be able to accommodate at least, members zooming in if we need that. We're trying to get the city to videotape it. They had stopped doing that at some point last year, but we'd like to get that as well. Otherwise, we'd have to, as Jeffrey said, maybe bring in a computer and just have it filming all of us, which would, I guess, get the job done. It's not necessarily, Sarah, I don't believe it's mandated that we have filmed. That was just a
That
nice,
was what I was going to ask. You do not need to have it filmed.
yeah.
No, but we always have. It'd be nice to have.
Right. You don't need to have it filmed.
Yeah,
And while you can have people Zoom in, as they say, you have to have a quorum under the current new rules. You have to have or old rules, depending how you look at it. You have to have a quorum live and have made prior arrangements for what they call legitimate reasons for somebody who can't Zoom in. Who can't come live. So you still need to have a quorum live.
okay. Well, Jeffrey will take that poll and we'll proceed with whatever the facts are for the next meeting. So I guess I would
I
like
will
to,
tell you, if you're worried about traffic downtown because everybody's gone back to work, strike that thought. There's no traffic. I don't understand where all these returning state workers are, but they are not returning as far as I can tell.
Ralph?
Could I ask a follow-up question regarding the new state law concerning Pennsylvania agencies and the advertisement of the meeting agenda? Is there any follow-up on that? Our current practice of publishing our agenda, is that satisfactory? Are there any changes that we should anticipate to that?
As I read it, and I think as I've been aware of how this group practices, no, you don't have to worry about it at all. The gist of it is you have to put your agenda up on 24 hours in advance. If you're going to make a last minute change, you have to put it up on the building, the door, the whatever it is, the day of the meeting. If you do make at the time live rolling amendments to your agenda and they are de minimis. I mean, I just had a meeting the other day and the amendment went to authorizing somebody to mail a letter. Okay, that's a de minimis change. It doesn't involve spending any money. There's no budget. And those are the two criterion. Is there any budgetary impact and does it change the published budget generally? Whatever you're doing. And if it doesn't, it's considered a de minimis. And so all of those things, it carries on as normal. I read it all and I thought it was much ado about nothing. However, having seen some public organizations and how they conduct business, I'm sure it's causing a serious crimp for some groups. It just doesn't happen to be anybody that I'm affiliated with because we all do business that way anyway. So I don't think it's going to cause you guys any trouble at all. No.
Great. Good to hear. All right. Anything else for the good of the order? If not, could I ask for a motion to adjourn?
Move.
Second.
Nice, Ralph. All those in favor say aye.
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 We're adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. See you soon.